to this computer. Hi, I'm Barbara Tucci, and I'm calling live in from St. Petersburg Beach, Florida. And it's my honor and privilege today to have Minx Boren on. She is amazing and has been my friend for many years, but she is a master certified coach, credentialed through International Coach Federation, a motivational speaker, a poet, an author, co-author of 16 books, an elder activist currently on the Leadership Council of Elder Action Network, a board member of the Women's Foundation for 13 years, and a past president of Executive Women's of Palm Beach, and so much more. But also, she taught natural gourmet in New York City over 40 years ago, but she teaches us all the time. She's amazing, and a health-wise coach, and now her book, just gonna hold it up. Oh, let me put it on speaker view. Sorry, guys.
I didn't get that.
Decades of Gratitude, Gusto, and Grit. Oh,
Grit and Grace.
Grit and Grace. So here we go. Decades of Gratitude, Gusto, Grit, and Grace. And it's her view from the 72nd, now 75th floor. And I just love that analogy. So Minx, tell us how you do it. How do you stay so vibrant, so young, so amazing? Take it away.
I've been doing it a long time. That's really how it began. I grew up, my mother was very sick from the time I was young, so I was very conscious about wanting to stay healthy. So way back when, and then this is a cliff note version of my life. Then my son had severe asthma as a very young child, and I did not want him on the medications. And because I had grown up in the restaurant business, I knew a lot about cooking. I figured that was going to be where I was going to be able to have an impact and make a difference. And I got involved in cooking. Then I became a nutritionist in New York, did that for many years. So I've lived a certain lifestyle since my early 20s. And I think that when people say, oh my God, you do all these things, you do so much, it was kind of one tiny step at a time. I think I'll start to exercise. I think I'll start to run. I think I'll become a marathon runner. I think I'll do several of those. It just grew. And then the food, as I learned more, going way back to Carlton Fredericks and Adele Davis, those were my teachers. That's how old I am. I began to learn the difference it could make. I worked with Anne-Marie Colbin, who started Natural Gourmet in New York, wrote the book of Whole Meals, was her first book, and then I actually contributed to the writing of her second book, which was Natural Gourmet. So I was very involved in food and still am. How I live my days, really, there's a part of it works around, I do intermittent fasting, so I cleanse for 14 to 16 hours every day. And then the first thing I have is a very healthy shake, like a Nikken shake. That's where I start my day. That's where I get my energy. I do have celery juice early in the morning. So that's a piece of it. I don't know how much people really want to know about all this. We had talked last time, and I thought it would be fun to go into more detail about it, about the 4 pillars, what I consider 4 pillars of health. So one is obviously food, nutrition, and the next would be getting enough sleep. And I learned it the hard way because I was, like many of us, I still am an overachiever, busy, know how to do a lot of things. And especially when I was president of Executive Women, I wasn't exactly sleeping a lot. And then my husband and someone gifted us a cabin in the woods. It's actually when we got to see you when we were up there.
Came in and out. Minx, I can't hear you right now. I don't know what happened. I got the cabin in the woods.
Oh,
now there you are.
Okay, I have no idea why it went off.
The cabin, you were gifted a cabin in the woods.
Right, and so the first night we sleep in this cavern downstairs. It's pitch black. And I wake up and I had slept 16 hours. And I looked at my husband, I said, that's ridiculous. I don't need 16 hours sleep. And he smiled and he looked at me because he's been dealing with my energy for a long time. He said, well, apparently you do. I said, ridiculous. Okay, we're not setting an alarm tomorrow. We'll just see what happens. So I slept 15 and a half hours. And then gradually over the course of 2 weeks, I managed to get it down to about 8.5, 9 hours sleep. And I said, I am never doing that to myself again. I am never jeopardizing my well-being to the point of such exhaustion that I can't really function. And so I've held to that. So that's a lot of years now. So that's the sleep part. So we've got the eat part, the sleep part. I exercise. I do an hour to 2 hours every day of my life. I have for a very long time. And originally I began to run. I began to be a runner actually for my sanity because I had a sick mother-in-law, a sick father-in-law, and a sick child, all really seriously ill. My only moment of sanity was to put on sneakers and get out and run at 5:30 in the morning around Central Park and be back by 7 in time to get my world going and then go to 3 hospitals. So so I began to, someone needs to be on mute.
Yeah, I'll work on that.
So I began by being a runner. And then my husband was a really fine athlete and I wanted to be able to do something with him. So I learned how to play tennis. And then and because I had a back issue, I began to do yoga instead of back surgery. And I've done that for 50 years. So it's step by step. So there's all this exercise. And the last part is that there's a spiritual component. I meditate every morning. I meditate every night. I do tapping. I do creative visualization tapes. There's a lot, but it keeps me sane and it keeps me going. So the question is, you ask the how, and this brings us into a conversation, Barbara, that's a good one because you've gotten involved in it as well. In order to keep track, I began to color code. First of all, in Myers-Briggs, I'm a J type, which means that I'm organized. You've got to get that. People who are spontaneous types need a slightly different approach. But basically, I color coded. So I gave sleep a color, and it's in my calendar, and there's in Outlook, it tells me an hour before that I need to wind down because I need to be asleep at 10. I have a color red for exercise, purple for spiritual practice. Time for eating is kind of like bright yellow. And they're all in my calendar. Now they can move up and down in Outlook. You can slide them up and down. In the very old days, I used to just use a whiteout and move it up and down. But the things that were the bedrock of my well-being, I color-coded. And then when I did that, so they were in there first. It's the whole story of put the big rocks in the jar first. Once they were in, once I was taken care of so that I could be strong enough and energetic enough, then I began to look at, well, what do I want to devote my time to? And that's where the whole list of all the stuff that I've done comes in and all the books and everything else. But it starts with that. And so talk about your experience of color coding.
Oh, well, what was amazing was when you start color coding and then you look at your overall week, you see how imbalanced you are. Now, I hadn't put sleep on there, but I probably should. I have a sleep app now that tells me, it reminds me to go to bed and like that. But the color coding, I got to see where I had kind of omitted exercise at one period. And so there was hardly any red in there. And then I was doing way more spiritual and volunteering and some other things and a lot of Nikken. Nikken's green for me. And so, yeah, it really, when you look at your overall week, you go, oh, and I need to put some me time in there. I need to put some other time in there. But I loved your book because one, you told us that you don't need to read it chapter to chapter. But also you have some amazing journaling questions and such. And so for me, when I go on trips, that's kind of where I think I got stuck because I was like, I'm in Amsterdam or I'm in here and I went there and I went there and I did that. And it became a kind of a redundant, boring what I did today instead of that juicy, you know, spiritual deepening that your questions bring us. So would you talk and elaborate also on the journaling and that what you're doing right now?
Absolutely. So the fun thing is I've been journaling since before I was a teenager, honestly, because I had a challenging childhood and I learned how to write as a way to think things through. So I've been journaling forever. I've probably studied with a dozen different master journal keeper writers over the years, including people like Ira Progoff. So from that, I began to play with lots of different ways to journal. My whole book came out of journaling things that I had journaled along the way. Very often, so when I write now, if I keep a journal every day, I keep a lot of journals, but I keep a morning journal and I keep a nighttime journal. My morning journal is what will make today wonderful. So the first thing I do when I wake up, because there's always the to-do list and you could just drown in the darn to-do list. So the first thing I do is I look at what's going to make today wonderful. So today I'm going to play on Zoom with Barbara. That's going to make today wonderful. And then my evening is kind of the same, the other side of it, what made today wonderful. So it's not I went to the supermarket kind of thing, but I had a wonderful connection, a wonderful exchange with somebody. I took a terrific walk and ran into somebody on the street early this morning and we had a fun time together. I pay attention to the best things that happen each day. Where some of that came out of is I'm trained in authentic happiness coaching. That's Martin Seligman's work, which is positive psychology. The piece about that is what they found is the single most important exercise that they have ever created is the gratitude journal every night. And it's very specific. In their world, it's very specific because you also look at how your values and your strengths showed up in what you did during the day, which is a whole other thing. You can take journaling to all kinds of different levels. To go back to the journal process, I'm actually launching a business, it just launched, called Purpose Journals. And they'll be available on Amazon. There's a website, purposejournals.com. And there we offer webinars and communities where we come together and brainstorm together and use a process that I'm also trained in called the art of convening to have really rich, essential conversations about how we're using the journal as a tool to learn and grow. I always say the best thing about journaling is to surprise yourself on the page. Don't write what you know, but write to see what shows up. Don't edit. And that's how I've done it. And out of that, the book, Decades, is really 39 aha moments. A moment where there's a before and an after. We've all had them, where something happens and you know something differently than you did before. And you go, aha. And you have an awareness and you can't go back to that old way of being or thinking or doing. It was for you, Barbara, when you were doing when you first started the calendar and you said, there's no me time in there. There's no temple and me time in there. So obviously something's wrong. There's lots of green. And I often say that those of us who work really hard drown in a sea of green. There's nothing wrong with green. There's nothing wrong with doing something productive and wonderful that we love. I know how passionate you are about NECAN, but how do you do it in a way that you can actually pay attention? And so at 3 o'clock, pretty much no matter what I'm doing, I get up, I walk outside, I ground on the earth again to take a break. I do our fun song, Every Little Cell in My Body is Happy, and I do my tapping. And then I kind of refresh. It's a pause button, and then I can come back again. And to remember that, because I can get deeply involved in something, my phone goes off. It has this nice little chime and says it's time for you to take 5 minutes and just breathe.
Nice. Do you have that set up as an alarm? A little chime?
I have lots of alarms in the phone that go off pretty much. They go off all day long. They're just kind of loving reminders. Mm-hmm. And I'll move them around depending on what's happening. If I'm writing, so for example, right now I'm writing a lot of journaling prompts, questions and thoughts for this purpose journal. And so when I'm writing, I block off 2 to 3 hours, because that's generally, my years of experience have shown me, that's generally my bandwidth. I've got 2.5 to 3 really creative hours. And then I start to, then I start to tilt. Then I'm slogging along and it's not coming. I need to refresh. I need to go outside. I need to stand on the ground, need to see sunlight, need to have something to eat, something to drink, whatever. And then I can come back again. So I block that out. Now, not everybody is what I am, which is particularly organized. It's kind of the way I grew up, and it's what my young life required of me. But even people who are spontaneous, if you have the blocks in there, like every day, no matter what, I'm going to meditate for 10 minutes. And there it is, it's 7 o'clock in the morning and you don't get to it. On Outlook, you just slide it down to a different place. If you're using a calendar, you can either cross it out or you can move a sticky up and down so that it doesn't leave the calendar. It's kind of an, oops, I didn't get to it when I meant to. But that doesn't mean my commitment is I will get to it. Does that make sense? I can't.
Yes, it's amazing. And I love too, because sometimes we had the week at the glance, and if it's not your calendar, now I have gotten more to my phone, but we used to use the color stickies and the projects, the small little colored stickies, which was great because you could just pick it up and move it to next week. You know, that's really not a priority this week. And I'm sure you had a lot of that. Mel just had surgery all through this COVID thing. That's just, I mean, I can't imagine.
My whole life. And so there was this added 3 to 4 hours of being nurse to my husband, at least. And so I had to remember that and be very careful. What do I absolutely have to get done? So how I do it now, just so that you know, I just did this because it's October. You're not going to be able to really see this. But what I do is I go one sheet. What Barbara was talking about is I used to actually produce a calendar diary that people could use to do this. And I'm not doing that now. But what I do is I have an October sheet. So this is October, and on it, the first thing, my big projects, the purpose journals, Art of Convening, because I'm a trainer for it. I'm actually going back and retaking the course. So what do I need to do for that? Time to write, because I put out a newsletter every other week and I'm writing another book. Time to learn, health-wise learning. So there's always the next book I'm reading. What I'm preparing to present, because I always have upcoming presentations. Friends that I absolutely want to keep a finger on the pulse of their life. So there are probably 20 of those. So I make sure when I call them that I know that I talk to them once or twice a month. So I'll put the date in when I do that. And then the organizations I volunteer for. Then on top of that, so that's my overview of the month. I know what I'm committed to, what's important to me, what I'm very involved in. Right now it's Elders Action Network. It's Elders Stand for Fair Elections. So that's taking up a big chunk of my time until it's over. But on top of it, I put a sticky note of what I absolutely have to do today. So that the calls, so that anything that's absolutely right now goes on that sticky note for today. And then every day I just change it. But the project stays the same, except that as I work my way through the project, I just run a line through it. By the end of the month, none of what's on here should still be there. If it is, like the specifics for the purpose journals will change. So next month I'll be writing prompts for something else, or I'll be promoting it somewhere else. So the prompts, the promotion still exists, but I change what it is for each month. And I find that this works. Just once a month doing that gets me organized and reminds me. Does that help?
That's awesome, Minx. Very good. I want to go back to Minx. We're almost out of our time, and we'll open up for Q&A with Minx after. And I put all your information in the chat, pretty much. And Balance Point is an amazing, is it bi-monthly?
It's it's bi-monthly.
Twice a month. You get a
actually every other week. Oh, it's
overview of some contemplative thing that
something
you're
to
bringing.
think about.
Yeah, to help you bring yourself into balance. And then she highlights other people, you tell me about Balance Point. Why don't you do that?
So it started at, I've been sending it out. Originally it was Authentic Woman because I was in partnership with someone. And then 5 years ago, it became Balance Points. And it's a coach model. So a coach model is always what's on your mind, or here's something to think about. Then here are some questions in relationship to that wonderful quote or thought. And then here are some action steps, some things you can do, because coaching is very action oriented. Then there's always a poem, because I'm a poet. So, and I'm always writing, and there's always a poem at the bottom. And then over time, pretty much when I started working on decades, I started to highlight people who, mostly in later life, but at any point, are living boldly in some way, or doing something bold, or taking something on. So this past week's Balance Point was about Louise Miner, who has had a whole career teaching music and singing in very famous choirs. And she now sings with people who have Alzheimer's. She's part of a group, and everyone has an Alzheimer's partner. And they learn the lyrics together and their parts and all the tones. And the last thing that goes in our memory is our ability to sing. And so they can do this. And so I featured what she was doing, and it's called Giving Voice. And you can see the link, and you can see them singing, and now they're singing on webinars.
So I put Minx's webpage down below. She does not use the email blast for anything else. It's just for Balance Point.
Never.
And I just know that she's been, I'm a mentee of yours. I aspire to be like you. And it's just so amazing to have someone like you that, I'm going to say it, 75, all your energy, all your vitality, you run circles around other people. I mean, I think you were executive of the president of the women's executive when in your 70s, right? Just 5
No,
years.
actually, I was the oldest president they ever had, but I think I was done, so it was 2013. So
Okay. Okay.
when I was president of that, but I'm still on the board of the Women's Foundation.
Yeah.
13 years now.
But
And
she uses our, she sleeps with our products. She has all the Nikan energy products, what I think is just all natural, right?
And I
And
grow pie water, which I feed to my plants and I feed to me.
yes, yeah. So she just is a great inspiration, walks her talk, and is just someone I just wanted to have in my arsenal and share with you guys this. So without further ado, go ahead and copy the chat so you got her information. I'm going to stop the recording and get with the person that invited you to this, and check out Minx Boren, CoachMinx.com. Thank you guys.